Hello, everyone out there in podcast world. I hope you're having a great day. You're listening to or watching us live on Service Business Mastery Podcast. I'm your host, Tersh. Today, we have Claire Chandler on the podcast, and we're going to talk about scaling your business and how businesses a lot of times will fail during that process of scaling. And we're going to talk about, we're actually going to use us as an example. We had some success over the summer, and we're going to talk about the pain points that we've encountered and some of the ways that we probably could have avoided those. So I'm super excited and I'm excited to learn more and everything from you. And welcome to the show today.
Thanks, Tersh. It's great to be here.
Cool. So before we get started, if you don't mind, I'd like to find out and share, if I already know, I like to share with everybody that's listening, your background and what makes you an expert and being able to come on to the show and share with everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a survivor of corporate America. So I spent close to 20 years in corporate roles, everything from communications, customer relations, and then I ended up, as I like to say, sneaking into the side door of human resources. Several years into my corporate tenure, they were looking for a head of training and development. So I took that job, really fell in love with, the being part of and being kind of on the leading edge of helping employees and leadership, from the executive team all the way down to the front line, individual contributors grow, increase their contributions to the company, learn more about, themselves, their strengths, and how they can contribute, in meaningful ways. And I left corporate in 2011. By that time, I had moved into a VP of HR divisional role, which was great, and it stretched me, but it really kind of reinforced that it was taking me farther away from that whole talent, leadership development, executive coaching focus that I had had. So I took a leap of faith. I left corporate, the corporate bubble, kind of went out on my own in 2011 and really dabbled in a bunch of different areas for the first 2 years until I established my footing and my niche. And so I formed my company, Talent Boost, in 2013 and focused in on and continue to focus in on helping businesses that are looking to grow and to scale. And working from the top down with the leadership on doing that in more effective ways so that they can, with fewer growing pains, fewer performance bottlenecks that invariably come up as you grow.
So with that being said, how did you get into that part of the niche? Like, were you seeing a lot of companies becoming a part of their own problem? Like, is that how you figured out that niche was there? Because everybody loves to hear about the success stories of scaling your business, but rarely do you actually think about how painful it is to go from where you're at to where you see everyone else as you consider quote unquote successful.
Yeah, and it's annoying, right? It's annoying when you're the founder of a company and you see others who do it with such relative ease,
right?
And it's so rare, right? Like the percentage of companies and leaders that nail it, that hit it out of the park, that percentage is so low, and yet those are the ones that we hear about. We don't hear about the ones that go through the hard scrabble times and and stumble and trip up and all of that. But the overwhelming majority of business founders stumble, and a lot of them do fail. And what I have observed over my years, doing this consulting business, is that they often become victims of their own success, right? So founders and business owners especially, usually start out with this great idea, and they've got this ambition to build a business around themselves. And that's typically what happens, right? The company at its start is an expression of the personality of its founder or founders. Mm-hmm. And that's wonderful in the beginning, but then they start to get a couple of clients, and then they realize that, to execute with excellence, they can't do everything themselves. So now they have to add a team. Well, the more people they add around them, the more it tends to or threatens to dilute their effectiveness, their personality, their ability to deliver, white glove service, et cetera. And so all of a sudden they land the whale, right? And I want to dig into your experience because it sounds like that's what your May of 2020 was like.
Right.
But as soon as you land like this big deal, because people have started to hear about you, you've got a great reputation in the market, people are referring them, other clients to you. And now all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, like we've got all this business and I don't think we've got the right people, the right structure, the right leadership, the right, processes, whatever, to keep delivering at a high level. And that's kind of the, I'll call it the holy cow moment, when I tend to cross paths with those businesses to say, okay, let's make sure that we do everything possible to ensure your success, because you've done some brilliant, amazing things that allowed you to have this kind of success and bring in this new work. But let's make sure that does not trip you up.
Yeah. So for anybody that's listening or watching that doesn't know already, in the month of May, we grew like 256%. And that's not even our busy season. And it was a culmination of a lot of different variables. It was like the perfect storm, the perfect whirlpool of storms. I like to throw that in there. And by the way, I don't think we have talked about this yet. You have a book that's called The Whirlpool Effect.
Yeah, that was a nice segue.
But with us, it was very much, we've developed these relationships with business owners over the years, and we weren't shut down like you were. So you're in New Jersey, the New Jersey, New York area, like y'all were shut down. We were shut down like more like Sunday afternoon here, other than Chick-fil-A was open still. So we had all of our restaurants were closed, but our drive-through restaurants and fast food joints, they were all still open. And we had developed relationships with a lot of the fast food franchises just over the years. And it wasn't that we had maintenance agreements with any of them. We just, when they had an emergency, they would come and call us, and, we would go do this. Well, then things just took off, and we just got all of these franchises all at once, and they really liked our services and everything. And so things just blew up in that month. And, it wasn't by mistake either. We were outbounding like crazy, and we were trying to, we didn't want to be a statistic of the virus and the pandemic and everything. So then, like you said, the people that got us there aren't the people that got us out of May, even. So we had to transition that effect, and we had to look at our next org chart up and see what roles need to go where and everything else. But we made it through. But we also, like you were getting at before, the business, I tried my best to make sure that the business was not built around me or my wife, Julie. We both are extremely active in the business. Because I see, especially in the trades, in the HVAC industry and that type of stuff, and plumbing, that you get a service tech that gets out of a van and becomes the owner. And first off, they're two completely different roles. They're very opposite from each other, and they look very different from each other. But if you get in there, and even once you start hiring service techs or service experts, it can still be ego driven. And because everybody's calling you for tech support, or they're calling you like, what do I fix here? And, it's irritating. Right. But at the same time, it's very much an ego thing. Like, hey, this business would not run without me. Like, they have to call me. And then you can't scale a business like that. You have to put those other people in place that are going to make things roll and make things operate more smoothly. And thankfully, we were able to see that before everything got bad, because like you said, it can get bad really fast after you have that holy cow moment. And we're thankful that that didn't happen with us this summer, but it very well could have. But can you tell us kind of transition into your book and what that is before we go any further?
Yeah. So, and just to touch on a thought before I lose the thread on what you just said, I think one of the things is as you grow, learning to let go a little bit of the delivery side, the service delivery side, because you can't do everything yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that also requires that the people that you delegate to, the people that you hire, the team that you build around yourself, truly act as extensions of you and stewards of the brand that you've built. It doesn't mean they're going to do everything exactly the way that you do, but they are going to move in the direction that you want them to. And you're smiling because it's hard, right? That's the biggest part. It's like, well, in the time it takes to explain to them how I would do it, I could have just gone and done it.
Exactly.
Right. But it's the same concept as, you give the guy a fish, you feed him for a day, you teach him how, to fish or what the outcome is or why it's important to learn. Right. And that's how you sustain. So, the Whirlpool Effect, the book that I wrote and the concept it's built around is all about that concept of sustaining success and sustaining leadership. And, that was not the original title of the book, and I hadn't come up with a title yet, but I was looking for an analogy that would help me explain or illustrate what real leadership looks like. Because you talked about how leadership can be, especially at the founder level, so ego driven, right? Yep. And you could make the argument that you're only going to get so far as a leader without having some measure of ego.
Yeah.
But you also have to have some capacity for, for taking feedback, taking it constructively, learning and growing. If you don't have that capacity, if you are impenetrable to, to sort of enhancing and evolving, right, your business is ultimately going to die. So the concept of the Whirlpool Effect, the analogy of the Whirlpool Effect came from a childhood memory so I'm in New Jersey. I'm a lifelong Jersey girl, grew up here, and the summers are very hot. And, it always ended up that the most popular kid on the block was the one with the swimming pool in the backyard.
Yeah.
And so, all the neighborhood kids would congregate there and we would, have a great time. And this was even before the video games started to become super popular. Like kids back then spent all their waking hours outside playing, right?
Oh yeah.
Until even the streetlights came on and the parents started calling from the stoop going, you're late for dinner, get in here, right? So anyway, we'd be in the pool, we'd be splashed around, whatever. And at some point, one of us would just say Whirlpool. And as kids, we knew what that meant. We immediately just started following each other in a circle. And after a couple of rotations, we could pick up our feet and be carried along with the current. And that concept, the more I thought about it, I'm like, that was such a great memory. And it was such a fun time. And it was such a simple concept. But that's what real leadership looks like. A leader has a very simple message that, the people around him or her immediately understand what that looks like, why that's fun, right? How they can contribute to it, and they enthusiastically do that. And I think, I keep coming back to your description of leadership as ego driven. I think that's where the egos of founders get in the way of their own growth. You asked, or you even, kind of surmised quite rightly that a lot of growing companies do get in their own way. They think everything has to be done by them. They think everything has to look exactly the way you would handle it or you would express it or what have you. And it's less about the style and it's more about the mission, right? And why that matters. If you can figure out what your mission is and why that's important, not just to you, but to the people that you're serving, you're like 80% of the way to building a very successful, sustainable business.
So I was going to ask a question, but you about answered it there. And that's how do we do that? Is it focus on the mission or focus on the end results, not the day-to-day grind, because I am the furthest from a micromanager there is. Like, I will watch you fail. I could just stick my hand out and help you, and no, I'm gonna watch you just sink. And it's a downfall that I've been working on. My wife tells me about it. Like, because I was micromanaged my entire career, it's like the biggest off-putting thing in the world. And some people, thankfully, that we brought on the team, they are very self-reliant and they're good to go. But I've also failed as a leader because I've hired people who needed to be micromanaged, and I just like, nope, boom, and watched them fail. And then so like I'm trying to work on that, but I feel like my thought process is that if I don't have a clear mission result laid out there, like if our end goal isn't laid out there, it's very hard for someone who is even self-reliant to become like to know where to go. And
Yep.
like if they come to a crossroads and they know the end results, they know what we expect, they understand our core values, they understand if you're in this situation, integrity first, safety first, all for one for all. Like if they understand these things, then that helps that thought process of going, okay, so I know that Tersh wouldn't want us to do this. It's integrity first. Yes, this is the easiest way to do it, but it's just the right way to do it. And then, we are known for providing that next level service. And if I cut this corner and somebody caught me, would that, what would they think about that? I feel like the guys and gals on our team that are successful and have had success kind of really grasp the mission at hand versus completing a daily task. I pride ourselves, ego again, on the fact that we don't have time card punchers on our team. Like everybody's part of the mission, or we try to make sure when we bring people on that they're part of the mission. Is there another way of doing that? Because for one, that's very time consuming. It seems repetitive, and as much as I'm not a micromanager, I'm also not a repeater. And so it's like I'll record videos. That's kind of how I've gotten, thankfully with the podcast, I've gotten decent with recording myself. And so like I'll record a video and say, hey, watch this video, versus me constantly repeating things. Is there something else that I could be doing personally so that I'm not running into the problem of like what we're describing here, with people not knowing kind of the mission or whatever?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's interesting because even in your hand gestures, when you were talking about some of your values like integrity first and safety first, and your employees who get it have your voice in their head, like Tersh wouldn't want us to do it that way. Those are wonderful kind of guideposts along the way, right? The purpose of having values that you actually live and the people embrace and demonstrate is to keep them on the right path toward the mission, right? But it's kind of like walking down a sidewalk. It's like, all right, everybody knows, you put one foot in front of the other and you just keep walking. But if you just keep your head down to avoid the cracks or avoid, a stick in the road or whatever, eventually, if you don't pick up your head now and then to see where you're going, you're either going to go off course or you're going to run into a bush, a wall, a pedestrian, whatever. So it's always important to kind of look at that long term. And at the start of what you just took us through, you nailed that. You said, is it a matter of having a longer view versus the day-to-day decisions? As the leader, there's always a balance that's required, right? You don't want to be a micromanager. I have interviewed thousands of people as potential candidates for, back in my corporate days and even for some clients. And I have yet to have a candidate when I say, what is the management style that you thrive under the most? I have yet to have a candidate say, I really am looking for somebody who's like watching over my shoulder and telling me every single thing I have to do, right? Nobody likes a micromanager.
No.
But they do want direction. They do want, they want to have the freedom to take risks, and they want to know that you've got some tolerance for failure within reason, right? So you said, is there something else you could be doing? I think it's wonderful that you're not a micromanager, but I would try to stop yourself short from watching them fail, unless part of your, process is, I'm going to watch them stumble, not so much fail because it's going to impact a customer, but they're going to stumble. And then I'm going to pull them back and say, okay, let's kind of play that back and see, how you could have done things differently, and not from a finding fault, not from a pointing out flaws, but getting them into the habit of, that self-evaluation that's so important.
It's funny that you say that, because we have a rule that you won't get fired, you won't get reprimanded for any mistakes that you make up to $500 per day. So you can make a $500 mistake and you won't hear from me.
How many employees do you have? Because I want to do some quick math on that.
Yeah, it could get expensive, and rarely do they. But it also goes to the culture thing too. Like, you can give away $500 worth of stuff, product, or we ask people like little random things like under $20. What could you not live without? That's under $20. Like when we're doing the actual phone call of scheduling a service call, and they'll just say something like a Snickers bar or a taco, and then a service expert can see that, and they show up to the door with a Snickers bar, and they're like, I said that in passing conversation, 3 visits ago. I completely forgot about that conversation. But stuff like that, and they can do wow services. They can change a light bulb and not charge someone for it. They'll write it down, and they can do up to like $500 a day, and they won't hear from me. But one thing that anytime that we struggle, and I completely forgot that I do this, but I do it every time, and it's my lead guy. I feel like he gets the most out of it, but I really honestly, I ask them all, and I hope they all get something out of it. And it becomes a joke most of the time, but I always ask, did you learn something? Like, did we learn something out of this conversation? Did we learn something out of, this particular struggle, or the new thing that we haven't seen before? And they're like, yeah, we learned something. And then, it truly becomes a laughing thing, and we can just laugh off whatever mistake that we made, or and sometimes when I see, I watch them fail, and I have in the past let them fail, and that obviously costs tens of thousands of dollars if somebody quits or gets fired because of that, and I have to hire someone to replace them. But now it's more like I'll let them struggle while I'm on the other end of the phone, and then at the end of the 30 or 45-minute conversation that really should have been a 5-minute conversation if I just told them the answer, then we have that. Do we learn anything throughout this conversation? Do we learn anything throughout this experience? And I hope that they do. Rarely are we getting multiple phone calls for the same scenario. And when we do, it's like we're having an off day, and we can kind of have that conversation. But I think that's one of the biggest things that I picked up even this year, and is asking that, and then Julie, my wife, she's a nurse. Like, up until this year when she came on board with us, she was a nurse full time, and that's when she teaches her nursing people that, to and she constantly is on me about this too, and I don't do it as good as I should, or at all, hardly. But she's the one that does this. But she teaches, and then has them teach back to her to make sure that they understood what they're saying, what instead of just going, I get it, yeah, and they have no, like, just go right over their head. Whereas, yeah, I don't want to go down that, rabbit trail there, but yeah, I just, that failing with kind of empathy, I guess, maybe that's the best way to say it. Like,
that's a great way to say it.
And letting them fail, but not being a screamer at them because they're failing type scenario.
And too often companies send that mixed message, right? They say, we have a high tolerance for failure. We want you to take risks. We want you to innovate, whatever. And then the minute that you screw something up, they drop the hammer, and it's like, then, your promise of what this culture is going to be all about is not, delivered. And that's where you see turnover. That's where you see your best employees leave and your worst employees stay. Yep. And infect everybody else. Speaking about your wife being a nurse, who, in my view, they are the frontline heroes right now. Always were, but especially this year. So please thank her for her service. But it reminds me of, there was a CEO I was talking to a while back, and he's in the the pharmaceutical space, and he went to medical school, and he said, the mantra in medical school was, see one, do one, teach one.
That's it.
And
yeah.
so,
that's the whole thing I was thinking of when I was saying.
Yeah, that's right.
What she keeps saying, what she said, she says it all the time. I'm supposed to know this.
Yeah, see one, do one, teach one, and it's a great, and that's when you're talking about, like, operating on people and stuff, and I know the one is kind of a loose term, right? It's not, okay, watch it once, do it once, now teach somebody else how to cut somebody open, but it is a very, I think, valuable concept for leadership, right? Where you bring people on, you show them the right way to do things, you allow them the space and the capacity and the flexibility to do it in their own way. Give them the feedback, do that self-evaluation, get them into that constructive habit, right? We all have bad habits, and every time you hear the word habit, you immediately go to the negative. You say, well, I have a smoking habit, or this habit, or that habit, right? But we can wire ourselves and our behaviors to be positive and constructive. And one of the best habits is that self-reflection and self-awareness. So I think you are very much on the right track in terms of giving your folks the freedom, the flexibility, and the permission to stumble a little bit, and short of failure that's going to impact a customer.
Right.
Because it's only in taking risks that we grow, right? Mm-hmm. You're not going to grow as a business, as a leader, and your employees are not going to grow if they are not allowed to take risks. But getting them into that habit of that self-evaluation. And I always say that to managers that I coach about, it's performance management, performance review time, and I've got to give some negative feedback. You know what? The easiest way to do that, especially if it's going to be a potentially difficult conversation, is let them talk first. Ask them, let's kind of go through the conversation you just had on the phone, or the service call that you were just on, that I observed. It's less important that I point out to you what you did and did not do correctly, right? Yeah. It's more important that you can review that and get into that habit of saying, if I had that to do over, this is how I would have started the exchange, or this is how I would have executed on that, or this is the way I would have, spoken to that customer. The more you can get your employees to acknowledge before you have to, what they could have done differently, now that switches you into a mode of being able to agree with them. And we all want people to validate us, right? Yeah. So if you can get your employee to go, you know what, looking back on it, I should have done this, or I wish I had done that, or I would not have done X, Y, Z. Then you can say, you know what, I agree with you. That's a great observation. So let's work on that for next time. So that's a much more positive way of giving that feedback.
Yeah, I like that. And I'm thinking in our business, so we debrief after every single service call, after they leave somebody's house or somebody's business, that we debrief. Would it be safe, or would it become a blah norm if I asked every single time, or the dispatcher asked, what would you do differently on this service call?
I think over time that could get a little bit routine.
Yeah.
If you've never done it that way, it's certainly a great kind of bridge to what I would recommend longer term, which is, okay, what went right? What might you have done differently? And how can we make the next, exchange or service delivery or phone conversation or whatever it is, even more amazing for the customer, right? Because without your customers, you don't have a business. A lot of people say, well, without our employees, we don't have a business. You started hiring employees because your customer demand went up. So if you don't take care of your customer, right, feed your customer, nourish your customer, deliver the service to the highest level you can, in ways that you would do yourself, right? If you could if you could clone yourself, then your
Only
customers are
the
just going
good
to go
parts
somewhere
of
else.
yourself.
Yeah, well, right. Only the best
Absolutely.
parts of yourself, right?
Because I have a huge ego, but I also very much recognize that I have some major areas that I have to work on too.
But you know what? I love the fact that you are so able to let go, because being a founder of a business and a business owner, I'm an entrepreneur myself. I know a fellow control freak when I see one. I mean, you have to be a control freak when
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur or a founder. It's the nature of the beast. But the fact that you've been able to let go to some extent, and I think where you've sort of caught yourself that you overcorrected was, letting people stumble to the point of failure. You want them to take risks, but you also want them to understand in what direction you want them to take risks.
Mhm.
Somebody said to me earlier this week the phrase, fail forward. You
Yeah.
do want people to fail forward, right? Not set your business back, not set themselves back.
Mhm.
If they lose confidence in their ability to delight your customers and deliver the service that reinforces your brand, then you've kind of damaged their ability to bring you closer to your mission. So and that's different from coddling them, just telling them what they want to hear, stroking their ego. You
Mhm.
don't strike me as somebody who surrounds yourself with a bunch of yes men,
Nope.
right? Even though you're ego driven, that's fine.
Yeah.
But you want to know that the people in your team are completely on board with what your mission is and why it matters. And like I said before, if you get those two things nailed, at least in your mind, you're
Mhm.
80% of the way there. And then it's a matter of making sure that everybody on your team understands that, and that your customers understand that too. One of the things you asked me before was, is there something else you could be doing, in terms of how you communicate? I love the fact that you send out videos. The key is always going to be consistency. So, I know that part of your instinct is to say, I don't want to be repetitive. I don't like to repeat things. I'm like that with, when I was a people leader. It was like, you can make mistakes, just don't repeat the mistakes, right? Like,
Exactly.
that's, you again, fail forward, fall forward, right? But being consistent in your message and continuing to reinforce your mission and why it matters, the impact it has on customers. Um, every communication should tie back to that. Everybody on your team should see the connection between what they do, regardless of their role, and how it contributes to your mission, right? How their spot in the swimming pool
Yeah.
contributes to that whirlpool effect.
Cool. I like how you brought that back.
Thank you.
Cool. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we part ways here?
I just I want to thank you again for the opportunity to chat with you. But I just think, kudos to you that you had enough self-awareness that when you started to really kind of double up your revenue in May, and congratulations on that as well, especially in the year of COVID, right?
Right.
That you had enough self-awareness to say, to quote Marshall Goldsmith, what got us here is not going to get us there. And you probably made some mistakes as you grew and as you
Oh, yeah.
evolved your leadership, of course. But the fact that you acknowledged that and the fact that you made adjustments, it is great. I think the word to the wise in terms of businesses that are in that situation is, don't assume you have all the answers. Certainly take that opportunity, not to become a victim of your success, but to become a learner from your success, right? So we've doubled our size, or we've tripled our revenue, or we just landed this huge account. Let's take one step back before we just all hands on deck, dive in, roll up your sleeves and get it done. Take that one step back and say, are we structured, functioning, staffed, resourced, and of the right mindset to move forward and deliver this with the same or better level of quality than we've always done and people have come to rely upon? And if the answer is anything but a hell yeah, then raise your hand and get some help. And that's not a shameless plug for me. Like there are people in your existing network, that absolutely can help you see beyond your own forest. Don't ever just assume, well, I'm the leader, so I've got to have everything figured out. Your growth should be an opportunity for you to reinvest in your business's future and in your status as a leader. So look for those opportunities and absolutely take advantage of those to learn and to move forward.
Sweet. Thank you. Where can we connect with you and learn more and grow?
You can, and your audience can reach out to me at clairechandler.net. That's my website. There's a lot of free goodies on there on the resources page. So, you can grab those and immediately apply them to your business. And there's a bunch of ways that you can contact me and set up time for a free call if you'd like.
Sweet. Thank you so much. Thank you again for coming on the show.
It was a pleasure. Thanks.
Yeah, it's been great. So if you are watching or listening to this, please don't hesitate to reach out. Obviously, based on this conversation, she's full of tons of knowledge, and I'm super excited to hear feedback from everybody who does reach out and develops more of a relationship. If you have any questions for me, as always, Tersh@serviceemperor.com. That's the email that comes to my phone, and connect if we're not connected on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn or all those platforms where I'm there. But with that being said, I hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk again next week on the Service Business Mastery Podcast, the podcast focused on service business owners, managers, and technicians who are considering becoming business owners themselves. Have a wonderful day.